Hi, everyone. Welcome to APMP Colorado Chapter webinar series. I'm Abby Halder. I'm your program's chair. Welcome. Thank you for making time to join part 2 of our webinar series with Josh Thiel of Hinz Consulting, just discussing technology and the AI selection criteria.
If you don't know me, or if you weren't on last time, my name is Josh Thiel. I'm kind of new to the industry, actually. So I did 21 years in Joint Special Operations and First Special Forces Group primarily. Fell in love with technology in 2011, working with Palantir, and found out, wow, technology can really help my special operators out. So my passion became super empowering people with technology. About a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, Hinz Consulting grabbed me and said, hey, we want to do an AI Center of Excellence to really carry our company and then the industry into the future of generative AI, because we're at this pivotal point of change and technologies that are really impacting our industry. So I surrounded myself with a team of long-standing proposal experts like Katie Clatterbach and Jessica Davis and Bill Von Hagel. And I was teaching them some technology, and they were teaching me some proposals, and we started to fuse together and make our team there at the Center of Excellence. A quick catch up and a refresher in case everybody forgot is we really have the technologies bucketing into a few pieces. We've got the technologies that are really focused on the proposal management and team coordination. We've got technologies that, and everyone's kind of saying AI, but you got to know what you're buying, right? Proposal management software. We've got generative AI, so it generates content, actually written words for you. The better the system, the more it actually pulls from yourself and sounds like you. We've got some specialty solutions like editing software and shredding software. We're going to talk about that a little bit more today. And then we've got a few other things on go-to-market and pricing coming up at each of the fringes. So that's the quick catch-up.
Yep, who is currently using an AI tool? And I see about 67% are using AI tools and about 30% are not.
I'm curious if they're using a paid-for tool or an open source tool. So if you're using Chat GPT or Copilot, let's not count that as a tool. If you're using it as a paid-for tool that has its own domain, then that's definitely what we want. And that may feed into the second poll there too. So a quick refresher on a domain. We discussed this last time. If you are on a system where you can upload your own content, your own background, your past performance, your proposals that you've already written, your marketing material, and it's generating content from your material, you've probably got your own domain, right? If you don't, then you're probably using open source. And we're not going to go and touch all part 1 like we did last time. Today, we're going to excel into part 2, which for part 2 today, we're going to focus on the ROI of selecting a tool and some considerations about each of those tools in each of those categories I mentioned. So I'm going to share screen here, and we're going to continue.
You see the results of our poll quick, Josh, before we get into it on which ones are using?
I do. You want to just kind of state that out loud for everybody in case they're not seeing it?
Yeah, so it looks like it's a pretty even split between, 25% you said Qvidian, 25% responsive, 25% auto GenAI, and then 25% Rohirrim.
Got it. Okay, so everybody's using a little bit different. Great. Again, the refresher that I want to remind everybody, that first graphic from last time is where does all that technology sit? And that technology sits kind of in these different boxes, right? Some go-to-market here at the front, which we really haven't discussed on this call, but realize that you're going to run into these. Just know what you're seeing when you get there. Is it helping you find opportunities or search or screen opportunities? You've got your management software right here. You've got your generative AI software that's coming up here in the middle. And then you've got some editing software here, and then pricing software is starting to come on as well. Kind of from that framework, today I want to shift gears and start talking about you a little bit before we go back into talking about the technology. And one of the frameworks that we use at Hinz is to always think about people, process, and technology. For any business to run, for any operation to run, for any team or an individual to operate, you've got a fusion point between these 3 things, right? And so first, you've always got the people in the loop. The people are doing the thinking, the people are doing the creative thought. If you're dealing with a system, they're writing the questions, right? The prompts, right? They probably have the information. But most importantly for us at the end, which no technology is going to do yet, is the empathy and making the proposal compelling at the end. Right? When we think to processes, anything you do probably has a process, whether you've thought it out or not. And I just want to kind of refresh everyone and remind everybody, we're going to go back to our laundry analogy because we're going to use it a lot today. And the laundry analogy for proposals is, right, you collect it up from your kid's room, you take it, you put it in the basket, you take it down to the river, you scrub on it for a few hours, you hang it on the clothesline, then you bring it back in and you fold it up and then you put it back in the drawers, right? And we use that example because that's a process. And if you don't have a process, the laundry isn't getting done at all. But where we talk about GenAI is when you insert a washing machine, right, instead of going down to the river for 3 hours, or where you insert the drying machine so it doesn't have to hang on the line, and the thunderstorm rolls through, you get these massive increases in changing in productivity, and that's where GenAI is hitting us. Now, as we're moving along here, that process, if you've got a team of people, let's say you've got a large laundry shop, or you got a river, or people working specialization, that process can get very difficult to manage, very difficult to have awareness, especially in the age of decentralized workplaces that we're in now, right? And then doing it in sequence, we know it takes a certain amount of time, has certain efficiencies. We also know that with some processes, you can work in tandem or at the same time, which we often call agile processes, where you're working your piece, I'm working my piece, right? You're working your piece of writing this section, I'm doing my piece of graphics work, right? And you can work things in tandem, right? So the processes with larger teams or larger proposals, as you guys all know, can get very complicated. The last piece is, right, typewriters, right? That's where we started. We've had the technological changes with Word, kind of blew our minds back in the day. That's why it's a massive, very, very rich company and very, very rich man. And it took about 20 years before we came up to management software. And now we're into the age of generative AI, which we're talking about quite a bit. So the fusion point of all these things impact your productivity and your effectiveness, right? Why do we use those two words? Or let's just define those for a second in our head. The productivity is really how much you can do, right? It's am I using my time efficiently? Am I taking more time? Because time kind of equals money when you're talking pays, salaries, or even number of bids out the door, right? Effectiveness, I would say, is how high quality, like, is it affecting my P-win, right? How good is the quality of my output when I actually make it? Which that becomes a really important thing to measure when we're talking about the generative AI output. Humans are still working it, but you definitely get different levels of degree, right? If I put a question into Chat GPT, it's going to come out with something. It may not have my differentiators and sound like me. The effectiveness of it may help, but that's a lot different if a generative AI platform is just pulling from my material. The output sounds like me, it is me, it represents me, it takes less editing. That's effectiveness, right? And even a team, the more time you have, and here's the piece I wanted to think about when you're talking about process technology, the technologies are in a position to complete certain tasks sooner, so the humans have more time to build the empathy and compelling nature at the end, which then should give you a more effective proposal, right? And a higher P1 at the end. So keep these in mind as we're thinking out things. And this is the primary thing that we think about at Hinz, because, and you'll notice the people block is in the left upper hand side, because we always start there and it's critical to us. Okay, so the first thing we're going to think about is the ROI for proposal management software. And these are just the big things that I think about. And you're probably saying, what do you mean first order, second order, and third order, right? What I mean is first order ROI, second order ROI, and third order ROI. And those are the things that are easy to achieve. When I think of first order, they're the things that are going to happen right away, right? Second order are things that maybe you have to do some things, specifically in the neighborhood of process, people, or technology to achieve those and put some things in place. And then third order is where you get even more savings or more value out of something, but it's a little bit harder or more complex to achieve, or maybe you've got to look at that in your evaluation as well. So when I see proposal management software from the first order I think of the speed of search. So a lot of these platforms, they organize a bunch of your information. It helps you to create templates, right, with stock templates and stock language that you can use. It really standardizes the process, right? So if you're doing a lot of proposals, if you're doing proposals with, it's common to an industry or common to an agency, if you're on a contracting vehicle and you can always expect something the same way, that standardization is obviously going to increase the speed. And proposal management software can really help you gain efficiencies and turn yourself into a machine for bidding on things, right? High degree of first order ROI, they should all deliver those things. The second order, though, is what I call process awareness, and it's aligning everyone to the same process, right? So you can imagine a big Toyota factory. If everyone is operating off a different process in their head, they're doing different pieces on different timelines, that creates inefficiencies. Things are sitting around, things aren't getting done when it could be. You have some things stockpiling. Maybe you don't even have enough people in the right places, right? So aligning everyone to the same process, proposal management software does that very well. It's very visible for people to see, and they've got to kind of follow lockstep in the process or their portion of the process, right? And that's where we get into Agile too. The better software platforms and more advanced, it allows people to go in and complete pieces of their work, notifies them when their work is due, notifies them when some other step is done, and it's time for them to do their step, right? So that's a little bit more complex for the software, or maybe sometimes it's harder to set up, right? But it's definitely a next order of productivity and efficiency for you. And the last one is collaboration, right? When you have collaborative portals, right, we all kind of, can use SharePoint to be in a document, same document, allows the proposal manager to coordinate things. The proposal management software integrates that in so you can coordinate better internally. You can collaborate on the same product at the same time or back and forth in an agile manner. Like sometimes you're on it for 10 minutes, then I'm in it for 10 minutes, you're in it for 10 minutes, we're on at the same time. There's a chat functionality in there and you get the collaboration. And then the more complex piece is the number of users or user seats you have. And if there's a way to collaborate from within inside a proposal team and proposal experts with your SMEs, right? And that's the most complex piece for collaboration, I would say, in a proposal management tool, but it can definitely gain efficiencies and ROI.
Josh, have you seen, like, what are your thoughts on proposal management software, as you talk about this stuff, integrating project management capabilities and software so that you kind of have, hey, here's our proposal, you manage it the same way you would almost a project?
Yeah, so that's really what the software is, and that's what it was based on. When we got to software that was specifically for proposal management, it was a fusion between project management disciplines and concepts fused together with proposal processes, and they found a way to take our proposal processes and automate them and code them into software, and it was a fusion of those two disciplines.
Okay. Yeah. I just think it makes it more sticky if you can engage outside of the proposal teams, outside of the BD teams, and have a tool that you own that the engineers say, I like this, and sales reps or whoever it is in your organization can also use it and gain additional ROI, right?
I mean, absolutely. So, a lot of the larger companies have a central division or central strategic proposal shop, and then it's still the line divisions and line units that are doing a bulk of the proposal as well. Sometimes the proposals that are, say, 50 million and above, the central proposal team does, and below that the divisions do, but they'll still reach back into that central proposal shop for expertise or support, right? So there's a lot of different processes out there, and that can make it pretty complicated on the management software, but the collaboration is key. The next thing is that passage of information between your capture folks into your proposal management, and then somewhere in there you got pricing at both ends with strategic pricing and the final pricing, tactical pricing, right at the end, bid and no bid at the front for that pricing, and then final price at the end. So all of those pieces, that's a lot of different specializations, and we see those throughout our scope of practice quite a bit, right? What we usually find is when we came in hourly, we would fill a gap for someone in there, but we also do a lot of managed services where we figure all that out for efficiency internally, and we know software helps us do that, right? But the collaboration and information exchange, I was just talking with the company yesterday, and it's like the proposal team feels like they're starting blind and they have no information from capture. I'm like, wow, you're investing in X and you're not getting any value out of it for the proposal team. It's like they're starting at ground zero and banning it themselves, and they aren't even getting the strengths and win themes from the capture team. So it's completely disconnected, and they're missing out on really effective writing and just a lot of productivity and time, right? So the management software should span all those phases and all those different levels of expertise, right?
As I'm building out, my tools for my toolbox, my team, the people that I would want to have on my team. I work for a small startup. I see a lot of people proposing this type of software to me. It's like, hey, we can do X, Y, and Z, and we can do cross. So I always go back to your first circle graph chart, right? There's all these like clusters across the life cycle. But I see a trend of, hey, these guys are starting to innovate and try to have like a massive bubble across all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's interesting to see the capabilities. I haven't implemented it yet in practice. But I think it's appealing to C-level leadership when you can make a pitch that says, hey, this software is not only going to help my group, but it's going to interact with Salesforce. It's going to act with the engineering teams and developers and all that stuff.
I think, we discussed it quite a bit last time, is we've got the GenAI companies starting to add the functionality laterally for more of the proposal development process. And then we have the proposal management software who's broad like this, trying to go deep and add in the generation. And we've got to remember, it's like to us, if you're not a software person, it's all the same. Yeah, there are people that make software, right? But think about a football game or a baseball team, right? The lineman definitely has different skills than the quarterback, right? The shortstop definitely has different skills than the catcher, right? So to us, it's all baseball or football, but to them, when you're taking someone whose DNA is proposal management software and management, that is different than someone who is working generative AI software, right? So there's varying degrees of clunkiness. Last time, if you remember, we talked about, as you're trying to add it in, knowing what you're buying, or if someone's trying to tack it on quickly, there can be exposure points as they're outsourcing different pieces, which can expose your data too, even though you think it's a closed domain, right? So knowing where your data is going and where it's generating from and who their user agreements are always things you should ask in the tool selection process. All right, so moving along, right now you're like, Josh, did you mess up those graphics? What are all those crazy lines? What's going on, right? Why aren't they straight? What's different about them? We'll get to that in a second, right? I've got them all crazy because while proposal management software and our proposal processes that they're built on are pretty standardized, how we're using generative AI is still so new that it's a curvy, crazy path of how we're actually realizing ROI and how we, more importantly, measure the ROI and benchmark the metrics. So if we start at the top here, people don't talk about it because they tend to focus on the keyword generative AI. How does it generate content as the focus of the ROI and the gains? But I go back further and I start back with the research assistant component. All the generative AI platforms are really, really good as a research assistant if it has your own information in its cloud, or if it's accessing through your SharePoint, or if it's on-prem, right? The three ways that you can deploy and have that large language model interact with your data. So the way I think about it is this. Imagine underneath your office building, or maybe in your basement or your garage, right? You've got filing cabinets and filing cabinets of all of the history of Acme Rocket Corporation and everything that they've done, right? And when you have a research assistant, you tell them to say, hey, I want to make I've got to answer this question on how we do, what's our approach to project management? And that research assistant runs to the basement and spends a week down there looking up and pulling all the files on project management that your company's ever done, and selects like what they think are the best ones and brings them back up and shows them to you, right? And that takes maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, it can take a long time. Well, GenAI is going to go through all of those filing cabinets in the basement of your corporate building in a matter of minutes, right? Or seconds even sometimes. So as a research assistant, it's super thorough and super efficient because different than the research assistant who's going to get tired, right? Or they're going to miss a filing cabinet because they weren't paying attention. The thoroughness of the search is 100% complete. The second is the options they bring back to you are dependent on your question to them, or in this case, your prompt, but the options they present are usually pretty concise when you're talking about generative AI. I'll take one step back, and probably about 3 years ago, the hotness was like dropping a search engine into your knowledge management system so you could find stuff. Like imagine putting a specialized tailored Google search into your corporate files so you could find stuff. That really was like beta tapes. It got eclipsed within a year, really, or a year and a half as GenAI came out, because GenAI does that as well, right? So realize when they come back, when that research assistant comes back with the wrong information, you just reprompt. And usually as leaders, we would say, oh, wow, the research assistant didn't really understand my question. I got to reframe my question, and then they're going to disappear down to the vault again for a week and come back out, right? Or they've read through all the files, right? Now you can reprompt and retask that research assistant, and they'll be back in a few minutes again, right? So when you're calculating for your company and selecting a tool and thinking about whether I want management software or GenAI, or you're trying to make the business case to your boss, you've got to factor in the time savings for research and finding the information you want. That's the first order value before you even get to the generation. So yes, AI is going to do this better, right? And I think last time we talked a little bit about Boolean, the search of like essentially the keyword searches used to with Google that we condition ourselves to over 20 years. They're just not as specific as natural language, the ability of natural language processing to understand the context of a full question and then go out and search, right? I think that's what essentially we're saying here in the chat, right? So when you throw words at a system, it's going to come back and just find those words and return something to you. Realize there's also a lot of marketing in there as well that gets thrown in at you. That's how they make a lot of their money. When you're writing in a full question, AI has the ability to understand the question, the context of the question. It's almost like a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, a 10-word sentence is worth a lot more words than 10 keywords in your Google search engine. It's exponentially more descriptive and a better question, and comes back with better answers. Moving on to our second order, all right, second order ROI, and that's your content generation, right? And this comes back to just reminding everybody. So we got a wavy line there for research, right? People realizing that there's a value. People with pretty direct line. You see my direct line there, understand there's value to generate content really quick because they can't stand that white page staring back at them. We go back to domains and we think it reflects your company and it reflects your differentiators. The systems do this to varying degrees, right? And that's even within ones that have their own domain. They are not all as good, or just like, wow, this is close, but it's just not quite right. You're going to find, and you can measure that as a company, and we're going to talk metrics in a little bit, and have your people evaluate how close this was to reflecting us, our differentiators. Does it sound correct? All the systems, even the ones with your own domain, are going to vary in degree on how they fit and how high quality that output is and how it reflects you. Right. Last thing is, doesn't answer the question, right? I've actually seen some pretty bad software that it's just not answering the question. It can't quite conceptualize the question. What that yields is more editing time for you, and then you can do less bids, and you got less time for empathy and compelling, which decrease the P-win. Or the worst case scenario, someone leaves that in stock and it's incorrect. It hasn't been edited, it hasn't been screened, and it drops the quality of your proposal, right? So you and I both know, and we talked about last time, people are always in the loop. You're in the loop for generation at the prompt and the quality of your prompt. On the back end, it's editing, reviewing, and ensuring that it's correct and compelling, right? In the middle, you're limited by the capability of the tool, right? So if I've got a Mustang versus my old Renault Alliance 1983 when I was a kid, they just have different capabilities internally that I've got to work with, but it's still a human fueling up and a human driving it, human parking it. So what your system, as you're selecting a tool, you're selecting that piece in the middle, in between you on both ends, And I would encourage you, you may not be a part of a team, but if you know your company is looking at something, ask to be part of the working group that's selecting the tool, because ultimately, wouldn't you want to vote in the quality of the tool that you're going to have to use, right? Next one here as we go down is the hardest one, and that's why I've got the loop-de-loop line in there, right? So the path for measuring the ROI this is what I think the trickiest one to measure, and we're actually doing a very large, we've done a few of them now, but we're doing a very large metrics benchmarking and evaluation project for a company right now. And this is your organizational productivity. And the main one that I'm always after is SMEs, right? And so my bad Acme rocket analogy is, if I've got a PhD that we're paying a ton of money, that is the world-renowned expert in rocket fins for my defense company, and I've got another one that's the world-renowned expert and super expensive in creating the engine, right? So it doesn't go boom on takeoff, right? Those SMEs are valuable, and A, they probably don't like to write. B, they want to work the research that they love, right? And then C, their time is just super, super valuable, right? So as you're talking to your senior leadership on whether to buy a tool and the value of buying that tool, if you pull in all the SME white papers, if you pull in all the other proposals you've done, you pull in lecture notes, if you pull in slideshows, the tech spec papers and get those in, basically get as much of that SME information and brain in there as you can. As a writer, you're going to be able to generate a much more technical first draft, and then sending that draft to the SME to edit will always come back faster than forcing them to go after the white page themselves, right? And when it comes back faster, you're saving that SME time so they can do what only they can do, designing that new amazing rocket fan, right? That's a degree of productivity that is super hard to measure. It's tough because we don't have a good base benchmark metric for it right now. It's also tough because who's going to document it? And then it's also probably cross-divisional. If you're in a proposal shop and they're in a division that's working R&D, tasking someone to collect those metrics becomes very, very difficult in a project in and of itself, right? Often it's the task of the working group, but conceptually, when you're talking to hire or selecting a tool, you can make that pitch, and you've got to be able to explain that, because there's a lot of really, really powerful ROI, and it's a way to gain support for your initiative to buy a tool from the division chief for R&D or division chief or business unit that creates the fins for the rocket. You can get a lot of different support across the organization if you can explain the productivity gains for the SMEs. Of course, the sooner you get it back, the sooner then you get more time for the empathy and to make it compelling, which in the end, more bids and increases the PUM.
So it's not really about, people always kind of say, oh, that's going to replace my job. But what I'm hearing you say is that the ROI of using generative AI is much more than that, right? It streamlines efficiency. You're doing more. It's not like you're going away. You're just able to do better, more volume, more quality, all of those things.
Abby, that is correct. And I'll take you back to my horrible analogy of the laundry. Like I don't have anything yet that is going to pick up my kids' laundry, put it in the basket, and put it into the washing machine and transfer it to the dryer, and then also refold it and put it back in the shelves. But what we got is something that increases and accelerates pieces of that process, right? And the human's still there. What I'm doing is accelerating pieces of that process, so maybe I can do more time at the end. So moving on to some specialty software. We didn't talk about this one a lot last time, but I wanted to highlight it because we've been using it a lot more, and we've got some agreements, and there's some companies that are taking a different approach. Rather than go broad, they are going specific. And when I say specialty software, it's usually highly effective at a specific function in the process, and it's usually lower cost because it's just doing one piece, right? And I'll just say, as an example, I looked at probability AI and or proposability AI this morning, and looking at their software, they're specializing in the shred, right? They want to get you a compliance matrix, and they want to get you set up so the human can do the outline, which they think is critical. So that shredding of the RP is what they are obsessed with and trying to have the best functionality for that because they think there's such a value there, right? You've got perfected different direction at the other end, and they're all into the style and the editing and formatting at the end. They think there's a ton of value there, and that's what they want to be the best at, right? Good to great. They're very focused on their niche. For us in Hinz, we kind of took our agile approach to people to get multiple people working at the same time for some of our larger contracts. We've taken some of that approach with technology too. And for our draft proposal packages, right, which give you a package for a fix or a proposal for a fixed price to include the compliance matrix outline and the proposal, along with some graphics and desktop publishing, we've actually paired 3 different technologies in sequence to do that. So we actually are firm believers in the specialty software and pairing those. For us, our specialty software is the GenAI, is a shredding software, and is a editing software at the end. So we're firm believers in specialty software. It can be cost prohibitive for some companies, but I would say the specialty software is quite a bit cheaper than some of the others. So that first order is the process step, right? Can I do that specific step very fast and very high quality, right? The second one is the process fit, right? So does it fit easily into my process? Does it make sense to do this? And some of that comes into, can I take what I'm working on and import and export easily, right? So maybe if I was going to shred document, can I take the RFP, put it in very easily? That's pretty easy, drag and drop usually. The export, where does it go? Can I get it out and integrate it with something else or something else I do in my process, the next step, right? That's also important. And that kind of leads to that's kind of a manual way to look at it. The third order would be the integration of the output integrates into other softwares that I'm using. Can I easily take it and it's either a direct transfer through an API, so it's going to feed directly into the other software, or can I easily export and import it in and it's in formats that are the same, so I don't have to add extra steps every time I'm doing this. If you're working at scale, that can make a lot of difference. I've got, as you're on your journey for technology selection, this is kind of how I think about it, and this is how I collect the information, kind of how I work. The first is collection. Build awareness, right? So Sun Tzu said, know yourself before you know the enemy, and you'll never lose in 1,000 battles, right? And so you got to, before you start looking at the software, you kind of got to know yourself. So I start with, what's the task organization of you and your company, right? You've got to know that. And when I draw that, you've got your, maybe your company has on the chart the task organization of just your unit. Maybe you know that. But if you're touching different portions of the organization, if you are touching and pulling from SMEs, knowing those organizations, and there's also the unseen task organization that kind of ties into process and how a company operates. There's a lot of dashed lines all over for proposal operations, right? The people that you have to contact, the information, you really got to look at that task organization, not in the hardline hierarchy, but in the ecosystem that helps you build a proposal. And you've got to probably draw that yourself and chart that out. I just did that with a company about 6 months ago, and all I did was pull in information. I had like white sheets of paper all over with sketches, and it was everyone in the organization from their business lines, different perspectives on what their company actually looked like. It was nuts because they all had a different vantage point on that elephant, right? And they had different vantage points, not because the hardline hierarchy wasn't different. It was because of the networks of influence and those dash lines of how you actually operate and who you had to communicate with to get things done. So charting that reality is really tricky. And that's your first step, though. If you don't know that, you probably can't even chart your processes next, right? And so knowing your staff, knowing if your staff is changing, know if you're having we're facing a lot of companies that are going through a reduction in force right now. So their staff and the people they have available in the task organizations are changing rapidly. They're going through reorganizations. The next one is the processes, right? And you may have your tight, clean process for the big $100 million proposals that sit right in your staff. You still got to go to SMEs though. So there's those processes, how you interact. Then you've got the support mechanisms if you're a larger corporation, down to the divisions or line units and how they're getting support for you. Knowing all those processes is important because ultimately when you purchase a product, you want a product that's not going to disrupt or segment you off or stovepipe you off from being able to execute all those processes, because all that work still has to get done. So you don't want a tool that's going to lock you out from being able to operate how you need to operate. The next thing it informs, though, is after you learn a new tool and as you're thinking about it, evolving your processes and those dash lines, right, for the maximum efficiency. Next is, what are your goals, right? Usually there's something stimulating this, right? It's good to know that you need more throughput, you need more bids out the door. That's going to take efficiencies somewhere, because if you just overtax all the people, all the proposal professionals, you're going to have mass attrition, and it's actually going to snowball and get worse. You're going to get less out the door, right? You're going to burn your people out. So what are the goals of the organization? As we kind of move down, so you've collected, right? The next one is analysis, right? So there's the know thyself, right? So you collected the information on what the network looks like in the processes. Now I got to actually think about it, right? I got to really know myself. That's the reflection piece. And for the reflection piece, it's, okay, what are my pain points? What are the most painful parts in the process? What causes me personally the most pain, like hardship? What parts do I not like? All right, what costs us the most time? What cost us the most money? So I separated out pain points and metrics, because the first one is some things you intuitively know. That's where I start. Those are qualitative, right? Then I go down to, do we have any metrics, right? What are the quantitative metrics? And when companies are starting out with tool selection, I'll often tell them pretty early, hey, go ahead and have your people start filling out this spreadsheet at the end of the week with some metrics that are important, how much steps are taking, things are taking. It's tough sometimes because every proposal is different. Some companies bid on things that are very similar, so it's a little bit easier, but ultimately just getting some metrics that you can hang your hat on or think on or reflect about, because if you document them later, you don't have a benchmark if you do it after the tool comes into play. What are your metrics? What are the benchmarks? What are the qualitative components? And then with that, is there reorganization or is there staff change? I kind of mentioned that with the RIFs or corporate reorganizations. Are those hitting us right now, or are they about to come? So then I get into like initial plan, right? So you kind of got to go and say, hey, based on all the stuff I know about myself, based on the goals, like what are my resources and budget? And sometimes this is a good place to start. Sometimes you got to cycle back through it. Like, what do I have to work with as far as people and money to purchase software platforms? Next is prioritizing the gaps. So you're probably going to have a lot of pain points. You're going to have a lot of places where you think you can improve your metrics and efficiency in your process. You got to prioritize which ones you think are the most painful or costing you the most, or which ones are the biggest opportunities to get a higher ROI or productivity. Moving on from there, you've got evaluation criteria. So based on those gaps, based on all these things that matter to you, think back to our part one of the webinar, webinar one, for your criteria for your tool evaluation. And that's how you actually select and tailor those criteria that I gave you last time down into the criteria for you as you start evaluating the tool. The other thing you're probably starting to realize at this point is, do I need proposal management software, or do I need GenAI, or do I need to see a few samples of those to really steer in on which one I want? Or can I find something that's providing both now as the technologies are rapidly evolving? All right, so here's some potential questions for you, right? And this is, you know, as you're developing questions to analyze yourself and think about yourself, right? Keep that ROI in the back of your mind. You kind of understand what's out there in the field and the realm of the possible. You're thinking about yourself here. Do we have a strong proposal process? Do we have a proposal team, or do I write the proposal basically by myself? Either because we don't have a team, or that's just how we operate, right? There's, you know, Purdue's shop here tends to work with, you know, each proposal expert gets one proposal, and there's an external reviewer, but ultimately they write the whole thing themselves, right? And pull from SMEs, but they don't work too much as a team, right? They've each got their portfolio. Do we have a high degree of coordination in the proposal writing, right? Do we integrate SMEs into our writing process? Do we need to? How complex is our work? Do we have all their stock language on file and we just pull from that? Can we develop an effective compliance matrix? Like, you'd be surprised the number of companies we run into that they don't even really think about or generate a compliance matrix at the start of a proposal. Can we one voice or style edit comprehensively? Are you guys really good at editing or not, right? And again, these are sample questions. you've got to develop your own based on that slide that we just went through. Are the proposals we bid on standardized, right? And so I run into a lot of engineering ACE companies, and they're like, hey, our stuff, especially when they're going at the state municipality level, it's question and answer. It's always the same. They're just screening us for our capability, and they're really just looking at our price. It's very, very standardized. Well, a proposal management software is probably what they need to turn themselves into a machine to do that, right? And they need even less collaboration. All right, they just need everything stock and organized, and then the process followed, and they can crank them out, right? They don't need generation a lot. So you got to think about what the proposals look like that you bid on, right? Because they're different for each company and each industry.
When you do consulting, do you ask these potential questions, here's what we do today and here's how I would like in a perfect world kind of scenario?
Yeah, for sure, right? And we're kind of how we do it is this. We started when we were consulting this, and as the technology changes, we've changed. When we started 18 months ago, we were really focused on understanding the proposal process that you operate on before you even started learning the functionality after you bought a tool. And what we found is the people, and we were looking at proposal and your process change before. Well, that was kind of backward because you can't imagine how to change your process until you know the capabilities of the tool.
Sure.
So we've reversed that, and now we get people through the functionality training, what the product actually does, right? And then a few weeks later, after they're using it and working with the system and they've learned it, then we kind of do guided consulting, guided working groups to get ideas, wisdom of the crowd on where do you think the value is to change the process, right? How do you want to change it? But you really got to see the art of the possible before you can go to that. Like, how is self-driving vehicles going to change all the processes and routines in my life with my kids? I kind of don't know until I get in the car and try it, like what actually I can get done in the car since it's driving itself. How much is it really going to require from me? I really can't even conceptualize my process and routine changes until I actually get in that vehicle someday, right? Does that answer your question?
Example, yes, it does. Yeah.
All right, so I've got a bunch of decision trees, and they were kind of unique to specific things that I was doing. So I took the most basic thing I could, and ultimately I like to make decision trees. You're going to have to make your own. And I throw these questions at you because as you're thinking through your decision tree of what type of technology you need, and then ultimately which one to select, I'm just going to show you a very basic format on how to do it, right? And this is only a 2-order. This is super basic, but I'm kind of showing you an example. It's, do I have a process? Yes, I do. Okay, so are the proposals standardized? The proposals are standardized, yes. Well, I may just need proposal software. That's where I end up. Oh, they're not? Maybe I want GenAI if I already have a process and my proposals aren't standardized. I want GenAI to be a little bit creative so I can answer those unique questions. I do not, do I have a process? No. Do we write as a team, right? Maybe I need something collaborative then. So yes, we write as a team. Maybe the proposal software is going to be higher gain for you. We don't write as a team, so we don't have a process. I write as an individual, so I probably just have my own. We don't write as a team. Okay, the GenAI is going to speed you as an individual up really quick. So I threw this out as a super basic example, so maybe everyone could resonate with it, as how you take the questions you develop and you drop them into a decision tree, and ultimately you're going to end up with the type of software that is best for you. Now you could assign some probabilities here, and you can look at the softwares and say, okay, this one's a proposal management software, but they're starting to integrate AI. Maybe that's what I want. But ultimately, you can make a pretty complex decision tree with the questions you come up with to end up at the type of software, and then ultimately the softwares in those fields. As you we go back to that initial chart. Do I end up with Rohirrim or AutoGen's example? AutoGen's a little bit better for marketing, a little bit better for creativity. Rohirrim's a lot tighter for security. And so if those are my questions, right, the degree of security I need, you're going to end up at one software or another as an example, right? Those are both in the GenAI field. So that's kind of how I go through and I start to drop my questions in, end up at a type, and then ultimately end up at the most ideal, or we'll say 2 or 3 or 4, and then that's how you down select into taking demos, because you could spend a lot of time demoing 34 different platforms that are out there, right? So it's way better if you figure out the type that you need that's going to solve the pain points and get you the best ROI, thinking back to other slides, and then whittle that down so you're maybe taking 4 demos and you're comparing apples to apples, to use the cliche term.
Can you clarify or define proposal software versus GenAI? Because some proposal software would use GenAI, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of them have already started to integrate, right? As we said, like GenAI software, AutoGen's examples had just added shred capabilities, right? I'm sure it's in every GenAI platform's pipeline, engineering pipeline to do that, right?
Okay.
You've got Lupio, who started to add in generative AI functionality into the process, right? For the proposal writing.
I think that Sun Tzu example or analogy was so relevant because there's so many dependencies and uniqueness in our field, from what type of business you are to how you're doing proposals today. This was super helpful for me. Josh, thank you so much. This was great.
Well, we are going to do something, I think the first week of December with the Dallas chapter. And so, you know, maybe there's some coordination or people can jump on to their webinar as well. We're still zeroing in very quickly on the topic for them. So, you know, that could be another one we'll keep going. And then, you know, my contact information was up there. You guys can find me on LinkedIn or reach out directly. I'm happy to jump on with anybody and answer questions. In fact, about 3 people from our last webinar reached out, and I was chatting with 2 of them already. So I'm here. Hinz is providing their AI Center of Excellence as a resource to the industry as we try to benefit, you know, everybody out there in the industry. Thanks so much for inviting me on, and everyone should probably like clap in the chat or something for all your work. These are not easy to coordinate, to find speakers, to organize the tech, the test things that we do. So thanks so much for all the time that you donated and that you're donating as kind of a leader in your chapter there.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Everyone, thank you for your time. Have a great day.